Hello and welcome to the programme. Now joining us from the Kyiv Media Week is Skady Lis. She's a film producer and founder of Getaway Pictures. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So really your company has an amazing story. You started it from scratch. When was it? It was quite a few years ago now.
Yeah, 10 years ago.
And what was really interesting is the fact that when you started this, you had to do so many different jobs. You weren't just producing the content or the scripts, but you also had to deal with finances, you have to deal with regulation, and you still do it to this day. So for perhaps our audience, filmmakers who are perhaps thinking, well, I have to become a one-man band, I have to do everything. How is that possible?
Actually, I was kind of lucky because I had the chance to work with X-Film Creative Pool, like one of Germany's most renowned companies, 10 years before. So I had gone through their marketing department, through their business and legal department, and then I had the chance, like under the X-Film umbrella, to found X-Film International, a company for international co-productions, and worked for that company like about 5 years. Before I even started to do my own co-production. So I was lucky enough to have some experience and know some people, and at least I had seen 30 films being produced from the scratch to the distribution. So I kind of knew what I was doing, and that helped a lot.
So the experience, yeah, that's good. Instead of sort of jumping in at the deep end, you know. And what's been the most challenging part? Because, as you said, you've seen right the way through the production, from the beginning through to the distribution. So, yeah, what's the most challenging part? And perhaps how has this changed over the past few years, you can say, with technology and an increasingly sort of difficult market, you could say competitive market?
Mm-hmm. I would almost say that's the most challenging thing, because like initially when we started off as a production company for feature films, for theatrical distribution. And nowadays we can see that people do not go to the cinemas so much anymore. So everybody's using Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, other streaming devices. So basically the market is becoming smaller and smaller, whereas it's also becoming bigger because of those platforms like Amazon and Netflix, which allow even smaller films to be distributed worldwide. So like, for example, like a film that we did 1.5 years ago, Atomic Falafel, was an Israeli-German co-production, would have normally been shown in Germany and in Israel, probably a couple of more territories, but then we were able to sell it to Netflix, which now basically means that it can be seen all over the world, which is again a good thing.
Yeah, of course, because you instantly expand your market.
Yeah.
Without actually people having to leave their own houses.
Yeah. So basically, I think it's a big change in the audience, in the target audience, but not so much in the work field itself, because then again, for streaming and all these kind of platforms, people expect the same quality that they would expect in the cinemas.
Or perhaps even better quality.
Yeah, perhaps even
almost
better.
Yeah, because Netflix and other companies like this have to really keep up their standards as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, your company, as far as I understand, Getaway Pictures, specialises in co-production within Europe itself. Can you tell us a bit about how this works? And the trend of co-productions in Europe is really going up. So how does it work, and what's your formula to make it work?
I mean, how does it work? I don't know if you can put it in like 1 or 2 sentences. So there's so many different ways, I would say. So what I'm speaking about later today in the panel is like 2 very different scenarios. So one of the scenarios is like the biggest in terms of parties, co-productions I ever had, which was Goodbye Bafana, directed by Billa August and starring Joe Fiennes and Diane Kruger, and we were like 6 or 7 co-producers. Germany, France, UK, Italy, and I'm tending to forget 2 all the time. So, but that was like super difficult to set up, of course, but it also gave us the possibility back then to make a film with a back then huge budget of approximately 8 million. Out of state funds and sales and all this kind of stuff. And of course that one worked under all the European treaties that we have, like the European Convention and bilateral treaties. So it was tricky to figure it all out, but on the other hand, it's awesome because you have kind of a guideline. So the treaty and the conventions, they tell you, okay, each partner should bring this and that, and if this partner brings 20% of the money, he should also bring or be allowed to bring 20% of the talent. So, I mean, I'm German, I like regulations in a way. But so it's good because everybody is working under the same assumption. And then one like totally different scenario is on one of the films I was part of, Berlin I Love You, under the franchise, is like that we just had a German tax incentive and everything else was equity from the US.
Mm. So it's different standards.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you have the financial and regulatory framework that you have to keep in and budgets, but what about the creative side as well? What does co-production bring to the creative side, the process of storytelling, the process of actually shooting the productions?
I think it brings a lot of benefits because it brings so much creative input. So I mean, I'm from Germany, so I have a very German look on things, and so do German directors and German actors, and so it's I mean, every culture has his or her like specials, so to say. Yeah. And then once you start to co-produce, you come to a new country, you get to know new people, and you get a like totally different point of view on things. And I think the films benefit from that. So at least the co-productions that I worked on always did, because it always became richer when so much creative talent from all over the world or all over Europe came together. So I think it's a huge benefit.
And do you think this is a trend that we'll see going forward, these European co-productions?
I would like to think so, yes. I mean, it has become over the years more difficult to produce or co-produce with the help of the European funds and the local funds and the Eurimage fund, because it has become more competitive, and then again the money becomes less and less. But I think it still is a trend because it's also necessary. We don't have the studios from the US where you just go, pitch a project, and they say yes or no. If they say yes, they give you the money. There you go, ready to start. So, and we have to piece it together like a puzzle. And also then again, like speaking about Netflix and Amazon, I think it's nice to produce content not only for one territory, but for a lot of territories. So I think it's almost mandatory to have parties from different countries piece it together.
Putting stuff in.
Yeah, so it makes sense for the overall audience, not just for a German or a British or a French audience.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of amazing, really, that you're based in Berlin, but you can imagine that someone halfway around the world is watching your TV series that you've put your hours and your the money into.
Yeah.
So is this one of the reasons why you still do it? Like, what's your inspiration to carry on working in co-production?
I never learned something else. There's nothing else I can do.
I don't believe that for a second.
No, actually, to me it feels like I feel very privileged to be able to work in this department, because it's what I love, and to me it feels like a playground. Like in what else job you can have a castle from the 16th century one day and then a spaceship on another day. So it's so much creativity and something new, and you can like almost never pretend what a regular day would look like.
And I mean, you don't just work within Europe itself, but you work with Russian production companies as well. But obviously there's quite a tense political situation as well. We have the war in Ukraine that's fueled by Russia, and the sanctions, etc., that have come after that. So has that affected your relationship between how you work with Russian companies?
Not really, but the reason for that might be that my last co-production with Russia is already 6 years ago.
Ah, okay.
So 6, 7, maybe even.
But perhaps even your acquaintances and other people that you know in the industry, and what do they say about this?
I think there is people are sad about it. Like, for example, I visited a director, Sergei Bodrov, on set while he was shooting a film, Yakuza's Daughter, in Yalta. And it's just sad to imagine that now it's not a part of Ukraine anymore, and you probably couldn't go there And yeah, so I mean, of course, it's affecting the industry somehow, and of course, I can guess it's bad for the industry in Ukraine because there are so many sanctions and there are parts cut off, and
yeah, so it's a difficult situation. But today you went to the film studios
yes.
in Kyiv. What was your impression, having worked in Berlin for so long?
Actually, I found it amazing how big it is. So I didn't only see the sound stages, but also the backlot where there's like a canyon and the village and like other houses and even a little zoo with animals. And
I didn't realize they had that there.
Yeah, I mean they called it like a zoo. There were some sheep and some cats and dogs. And for me, being used to a studio that's almost in the center of Berlin, it was a huge place. So we don't have trees in the studio that much unless we bring them there.
Yeah, because actually a lot of, slowly but surely, perhaps it's a secret at the moment, but a lot of European television companies are starting to look at Ukraine as a possible destination because people have the skill set. There's a lot of really good technical people here. It's relatively cheap compared to other European countries, and also the space as well, the actual sort of infrastructure that's in place here. So would you ever look at perhaps, or your company, like, would you look at Ukraine as a possible destination for future filming, or what would be needed perhaps for you to even consider this in the future?
I mean, I found the studio facilities amazing. So actually, I have had a meeting already talking about possible future projects that I could probably bring here, and that would probably or possibly set like what the film studios are looking for. But yes, I would totally consider it because it's everybody has to look at the money. So that's a huge reason, and I found the studios in a fantastic like shape. So it seemed to me all to be like state-of-the-art technology, and everything looked like great. And of course, I didn't test everything, but from everything I saw, so it looked like a perfect working condition. And what would be needed, I mean, of course, like when coming from the co-production and especially the independent co-production, we're always looking for tax rebates, for incentives. And so I found it a little bit difficult to find out what exists in the Ukraine. Then, of course, I had a couple of talks, now I know. But I think it would help for other producers to come here if it would be a little bit more out in the public.
Like public information that's easy to find, perhaps in your native language or in English.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'm holding a speech about co-production, so of course I was trying to prepare and look especially at what is there in the Ukraine, but I couldn't really find it. Also, I spent a couple of hours like looking for it, but then I found out, actually I had to call a journalist that I know who I had seen had written an article in a Hollywood Reporter about it. So, and then I found out like something. But yeah, that was about it. So I think that would help because like it always helps to go to, like if you choose a country to go, if there's a little bit of an incentive, because like if I move like let's say 50% of my shooting to the Ukraine, then I'm losing that money in Germany that I could get out of the German incentives. So it always makes sense for a package, but like definitely yes. And let it only be for the nice studio and the possibilities to move around in the studio and to go out and have a little bit of shots there. And I've never seen so many old-timers staying in the studio.
Final question about your future projects as well, because you're involved in Berlin I Love You, which is part of a series. I think it's a 10-part series, a lot of famous names. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Berlin I Love You is currently in post-production. And yeah, we were lucky enough to have a lot of famous directors as well as actors. I think thanks to the franchise actually. So because Paris, Je t'aime and New York, I Love You were like very known films. So we had Helen Mirren coming to Berlin, Keira Knightley, Mickey Rourke, Ivan Rheon, Jim Sturgis, Jenna Tatum, the wife of Channing Tatum.
And did you meet these people?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Were you a bit nervous? Like, how did you, because I wouldn't be quite sure how to react if you're like, oh, you just see.
Actually, my experience is the bigger the names are, the more uncomplicated the people are.
Oh,
So
really?
the most complicated people are the ones that you wouldn't even recognize because they might feel they still have to prove themselves. But like for example, Helen Mirren and Keira Knightley, they were like so nice. They just came to set, said hi to everybody, not pretentious at all. They were fine with all the surroundings and everything we provided for them. And we were shooting in a rough environment in Berlin, so like in a rough part of the city, but they were like totally fine. So I was a little nervous until they arrived. But once they were there, everything was fine.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was Skady Lis. She's a film producer and founder of Getaway Pictures in Germany. You're watching UATV.